Hey everyone, this is another excellent article by William Watson of the Financial Post. And if I haven't said it in the past, which actually I have multiple times, support those in the media who actually do push back against the leftist collectivist narrative. We do actually have, thanks to Post Media, some outlets in this country that do give you an alternative perspective, opinion, or narrative in regards to the social and economic issue facing us all. Not saying you have to agree or align with every one of them, but at the very least, be appreciative of the fact that you are getting a counter narrative, where it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. Because, well, if you're just getting a one-size-fits-all approach or a single-sided tunnel vision type narrative, that's called propaganda. Anyways, let's delve into this article from William Watson with the headline, Managed competition in Canadian dairy, cannabis, and telecom isn't actually competition. New entrants want to try something out of the box. The box and its lawyers strike back big time. The Economist has a lovely obituary this week for Herb Kelleher, one of the founders of Southwest Airlines, a pioneer in the once revolutionary but now commonplace option of low-cost air travel. Time was when the people who founded airlines were former or even active pilots. Juan Trippe, who started Pan American Airways, trained as a U.S. Navy pilot in the First World War. Charles Lindbergh, who helped build transcontinental air transport, which eventually merged into TWA, he had been Charles Lindbergh, the most famous pilot of all. TWA's early slogan was the airline run by flyers. But Herb Kelleher was a lawyer. He studied English and philosophy at University in Connecticut. Went to law school in New York University, and then, at his wife's urging, set up shop in Texas. His bios don't record whether he had any flying experience, but it didn't matter. After joining with the operators of a tiny Texas commuter airline to form Southwest in 1966, he and his partner spent the next 5 years in court before actually putting planes in the air. What were they charged with? What was their crime? Competition. Existing operators argued airline service in Texas was already adequate, satisfactory, attuned to the public interest. Whatever the regulations of the day stipulated as the targeted standard of service, some more competition wasn't needed. Anything beyond the status quo would be disorderly and would cause harmful disruption to the industry and therefore supposedly to consumers. Yeah, let me just say, as if you really need reminding, when has competition ever been devastating to the consumer? Right? Having more options is never a bad thing for a consumer. Yes, before deregulation took off in the mid-1970s, thank you President Jimmy Carter, Senator Ted Kennedy, and Alfred Kahn, the Cornell University economist turned regulator who oversaw the reform, people actually talked that way. Competition had to be limited to serve customers better. Right? It's Orwellian speak here, folks. Kelleher and his colleagues eventually won their court cases. Southwest started flying and the industry was disrupted forever. The revisionist folklore of deregulation is that it turned flying into a crowded, chaotic nightmare. But of course, the main reason conditions changed is that with lower fares, many more people flew. Airports often couldn't cope with the upsurge. You'd think lessons learned through hard experience wouldn't be forgotten. But this idea that competition has to be carefully managed, supposedly in the interest of consumers, still walks the land, zombie-like. Several provinces are carefully managing the legalization of marijuana to the extent in Saskatchewan of deciding how many private retail outlets each town and hamlet can tolerate. It's a good thing restaurants are already legal in Saskatchewan, or maybe the government would try to manage the number of them too. Ontario has been doing the same thing with the private sale of beer and liquor, micromanaging its introduction to a ridiculous degree. The country's telecom sector is run on the same basis, with a careful balancing of consumer and producer interests. In dairy and poultry, we cost it producers so consumers supposedly will benefit, as long as they don't care about price or choice. Today's cheese eating is like yesteryear's flying, a wonderful experience people would do a lot more of if only it weren't so expensive. New entrants want to try something out of the box. The box and his lawyers strike back big time. Are there any industries in Canada where if you were going into business, your first hire wouldn't be a lawyer? Good one, William. Only last week, Ottawa announced a new review into the merits of open banking, together with a consultation paper Consultation papers used to be white papers, but this one is multicolored, strewn with drawings of happy little stylized Canadians engaged in financial transactions on their cell phones and computers. At first blush, open banking sounds like banking where the vaults aren't locked, which doesn't seem a very good idea. Or maybe it's banking where there's free entry of competitors, which does. In fact, it's banking where people allow a financial institution to share data about their transactions so human and artificial intelligence can devise new ways of serving their financial needs and improving their lives without destroying their privacy. But do we really need a federal review before any of this happens? How about if a bank or other financial institution simply offers consumers that alternative? If people like it, it takes off. If they don't, it doesn't. Managed competition isn't really competition. And if existing competitors, sometimes called stakeholders, have a dominant voice, as they always do in these kinds of consultations, it's even less likely to be competition. The incumbent's creed that mine interest is thine interest is so much hooey. As Herb Kelleher himself put it, smothering competition and regulation in lawsuits was an affront to my idealism. If you're going to let these guys get away with this, it's a radically different type of country from the one I want to believe in. Capitalist idealism. There's an idea that could fly. So yeah, once again, good job, William Wallace. And this is what I've been trying to tell people all the time. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but just take the time. Just take the time to think about, when the hell has competition, having more options, ever been a detriment to the end consumer? You know damn well that's always a good thing. That's always a benefit, because it means you'll get better prices. That means they're going to be competing for your support and your dollars. And when people are competing for your support or your dollars, that's always going to be a positive and a benefit for you. Thanks to William for helping people like myself point that out, but in his own words. This is Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.